I thought it was normal when I was a kid, but the more I think about it, the stranger it seems now. When I was a kid, we used to get cassette tapes in the mail for TV shows that never got produced. Years later, when I was an adult, I would become aware of the idea of a Nielsen house. For those of you who don't know, a Nielsen house is something that you're given as kind of a privilege. You usually get programs from the little box that they send to your home, and you send back reviews on what you watched. They monitor what you're watching as well, and most of the times you get paid for your efforts. You know, so they can see when you turn the channel and what you're watching more of. I had a friend in college that was part of the experiment, and when I tried to explain what we had been through, he said I must have been part of something different. We lived in a small house, high up on a mountain in northern Georgia. The house was basically a cabin, a loft room for the kids with a bed for my parents and a bathroom with a bathtub and a shower. The rest was just open space, and our living room was basically an old TV, a VCR, and a couple of bookshelves. The kitchen was on the other side of the house, directly under the loft where my sister and I slept, and I can remember waking up to the smells of breakfast cooking many, many times. We didn't have a Nielsen box. What we had was more like a Netflix service, except for cassette tapes. I was never really sure if it was a service that Mom had signed us up for or not. Dad worked in the lumber yard from sun up to sundown, and usually came home to eat and sleep. He would do this 6 days a week, taking Sunday off for church, and it was more like I lived in a single-parent household for most of my life. We got 7 TV channels, 8 if the weather was right, and the antenna was just so at just the right angle. But the videotapes were something we looked forward to. We didn't know where they came from, but they arrived on the second week and the fourth week of every month. They always came in these little black boxes, and they never had any labels. There was always a little card tucked into the box, and when we were done watching the show, Mom would ask how we felt about it. Usually we would tell her basic things, whether we liked it or not, and whether it was interesting or not, but more than a few of these weird cassette tapes had shows on them that my sister and I talked about for a long time after they were over. We were talking about them last weekend, which is how the subject came up. My mom died pretty recently, and my sister and I met up for one last time at the cabin to reminisce and catch up on what had been going on. My sister lives 5 or 6 states away, so it isn't often that we get to see each other. We like to meet at the old cabin where we lived, have a beer or two, and do a little reminiscing. Neither of us are married, so it isn't like we have to involve kids or anything. Most of the time, we're just kind of comparing war stories from when we were kids and stuff. But this weekend, she brought up the old cassette tapes we used to get in the mail and asked if I remembered them. It took me a minute, but I found that I did. I remember Bobo's Circus and Castor's Creek, I said, scratching my chin as I tried to bring them up. Oh, God, and I remember Laughing Place. I still think of that sometimes. Do you think Mom kept those tapes? She asked, staring out into the night as she swirled her beer. I shrugged. I don't know. I know that there's no way she kept a copy of Laughing Place. We threw it out into the snow, remember? She gave me a look of such mischief that I worried what she might suggest. Want to go see if we can find them? I see that the VCR is still set up in the living room. I don't know. Do you think it's a good idea? Some of those tapes, but she cut me off. Maybe they're not as bad as we remember. Come on, it might be fun. I started to tell her no, but she'd made me curious. This was the first time I had thought about those tapes in about a decade, and I wondered if they were really as bad as I had made myself believe they were. Surely what I remembered was just something a child's mind had created. The tapes were probably no worse than anything I'd seen on HBO. I finished my beer and told her we'd go see if we could find them, and she clapped her hands and sprang up as we went to hunt for them. There's only two places that Mom would store things like that in the house. There was the attic, and there was the crawl space underneath the stairs. We went to the crawl space first, since it was right next to the living room. It was a dingy little space, without much in it besides a dozen cardboard boxes and some dust bunnies. I started to tell her that it was useless to look for it, and after the third box, I was ready to call it quits. But that's when we found the box full of old VHS tapes, and I guessed I'd been wrong. She looked into the box like a pirate finding buried treasure, and when she dragged them into the living room so we could go through them, I began to wonder what had brought all this on. As I recalled, she had been as freaked out by the tapes as I had been, and the idea that she wanted to go through them now was a little strange, to say the least. She dragged the box into the middle of the living room, and we started hunting through the piles of black cassette tapes. Most of them were things that we had recorded when we were kids. We hadn't been well off, but Mom had won a VCR at a church raffle when my sister and I were very young. It was one of our most prized possessions when we were kids, and I remember bugging my dad about getting us tapes so that we could record our favorite shows. He had indulged us a little, and we had quite a few homemade cassette tapes that we had recorded from television. I saw old cartoons, some soap operas that Mom had recorded to watch later, and old fishing programs that Dad liked. Even a few of the labeled tapes that our parents and our relatives had gotten us for birthdays or Christmas. I was about ready to give up, wanting to tell her that we could just watch some old episodes of Pokemon or even some Thundercats tapes, if she was feeling nostalgic. But then she came up with a tape that I recognized from the very bottom. It was in one of those off-white cases that they used to send it in, the ones that let you know that they were from whoever was sending these things to us. And she blew the dust off as she read the label on the underside of it. It was the tape we had received for Bobo's Circus. "Come on, let's see how well it aged," she said, as she went to the VCR. Bobo's Circus was one of the tapes that I remembered pretty well. It was about a clown named Bobo, who worked in a circus with several other clowns and a few other characters to round out the roster. There was Wingo, who I had always just thought of as the clown with green hair. There was Clarabelle, the pink-haired clown, and there was Chachi, the orange-haired clown. And then there was Bobo, who had red hair. There was a strong man, just called Strong Man, and a lion tamer named Rob. It reminded me a lot of Bozo the Clown, the show that had come on public access around the same time. The clown would have problems, and then they would solve them throughout the episode. But they weren't the usual problems you encountered on a show like this. That probably sounds a little weird, but you'll see what I mean. I didn't think the VHS would work, but as it came to life, I heard the trumpets blare, and the circus music started as the title card proclaimed it to be Bobo's Circus. The VHS had 5 episodes on it, and I remembered that we had told Mom we really liked the show when it came time to return the card with the information on it. Bobo's Circus, Episode 1, Bobo's Big Top Blues. Episode 1 was fairly normal. Bobo wanted to be a real circus clown, but he just couldn't get the tricks right. He would juggle things and then drop them on his head. He would try to do a cartwheel and then fall down. He would go to spray another clown with a seltzer bottle, but spray himself instead. Bobo was getting a little discouraged, but the other clowns wanted to help him. Wingo helped him with his cartwheel, Clarabelle helped him with his juggling, and Chachi helped him learn the things that a clown needed to learn if he was going to be on stage. By the end, Bobo was the star of the show, and he felt a lot better about himself and his act. All the clowns took a bow at the end of the episode, and the message seemed to be about not giving up when things got hard. It was a good message for kids, but it wasn't the only message that they learned at the circus. Bobo's Circus, Episode 2, Follow the Crowd. The episode starts with Bobo performing for a crowd. He's pulling long scarves out of his pants, and his underwear come out in the last one. Bobo is embarrassed because this isn't supposed to happen, but the crowd begins to laugh uproariously. They clap and cheer, and Bobo feels that he found a real winner. After the show, Clarabelle and Wingo comfort him as they tell him how embarrassed he must feel. But Bobo is ecstatic. He says he's going to integrate it into his act in every show, but they say he shouldn't do things just because he got a big laugh. Bobo didn't listen, and he does the act the same way every time. You would think that the message would be not following the crowd because eventually they would get tired of this one. But the crowd loved it. No matter how many times Bobo does the trick, they always laugh and clap. Towards the end of the episode, Bobo just stands there and soaks in the applause as the audience claps and claps and claps. When I was a kid, this made me feel kind of weird. It felt strange to just stand there, accept their applause as they clapped. Why didn't he move? It also felt like he was staring straight into the camera as they clapped. And I always felt like he was looking at me. Underneath the grease paint, you could see how bloodshot his eyes were, and he looked crazed as the applause went on and on. The episode was the same length as the others, but it seemed to go on and on for a really long time. The episode finally ended with Bobo continuing to stare at the camera as the credits rolled. I looked at my sister when the episode was over, but if she was put off by this, you couldn't tell. Bobo's Circus, Episode 3, Liquid Courage. The episode starts with Bobo performing on stage again. He's doing wonderfully, really hitting his stride, but then he gets nervous and drops his clubs while he's juggling. The audience begins to boo, and as Bobo tries the trick again, he gets nervous and drops the clubs all over again. The audience continues to boo, and Bobo finally leaves the stage as he shakes his head and runs away. He looks really sad, and I remembered when I was a kid I wanted to comfort him because of how distraught he looked. I remember flubbing my lines during a play when I was younger, and how the audience had whispered and made me feel nervous. I felt like I knew what Bobo was going through. The other clowns try to comfort him and boost his confidence, but Bobo says he's not sure he wants to go back on stage. Then, a new clown comes out, and it's the only time I remember seeing him in the whole show. He says his name is Pluto, and he constantly stumbles around and drinks from a bottle with a long neck. He offers some to Bobo, telling him it's liquid courage, and that it'll make him a star. Bobo, not knowing any better, takes the bottle and has a long sip. In typical fashion of a little kid's show, he begins to sway and hiccup almost immediately. Then, they show the two of them laughing and pounding each other on the back as they drink from the bottle. It cuts a little, and we see Bobo being announced as the next performer. He stumbles on the stage with his clubs, but every time he tries to juggle, he drops them, and they come down on his head with a crash. The audience doesn't boo this time, though. They applaud and laugh at Bobo as he makes a fool of himself. Even as a kid, I knew that wasn't okay, that they were laughing at him instead of with him. Bobo continues to clown around for a little while, and when he gets done, he takes a big bow and stumbles off stage. The other clowns, because Pluto is nowhere to be seen by now, talk to him about how he didn't perform, but he was just being a fool. They tell him that those people weren't laughing at his act, they were laughing at him. They tell him that if he continues to drink, he won't be a star, he'll just be a fool. The episode ends with Bobo swearing that he'll never drink again, and all the clowns gather around him to give him a big hug. The message of the show seems to be one that was against alcohol, but it was hard to figure out as a kid. They never came right out and said that they were against drinking, which was pretty common in those days. Usually there would be a segment at the end where they'd tell kids not to drink or not to do drugs or something like that, but this one just showed Bobo acting like a fool and then deciding never to do it again. I began to wonder who had made these shows and why they just sent them to our house. Surely this wasn't how they had marketed them, but one look at my sister showed that she was absolutely glued to the set as the next episode started. Bobo's Circus, Episode 4, Sharpshooter. The circus has a new act. The ringmaster, another new character, introduces a sharpshooter named Wyatt. Wyatt is going to work for the circus as he made a name for himself, and all the actors welcome him warmly. This was the first time we get to see the strongman and the lion tamer, and as they all went off to do whatever they were going to do, that just left Bobo and Wyatt on the stage to talk. Bobo told Wyatt that his gun was cool and asked if he could see it. He wants to play with the gun, thinking it's a toy, but Wyatt told him he was never to touch it. He said it was a tool and that it was important and that Bobo couldn't just go around playing with it like it was any old thing. A little later, Bobo finds Wyatt's gun in a holster and he decides to play with it, even though he was told not to. Bobo pretends to shoot at make-believe targets, making a pew-pew sound as he does. Wingo comes around the corner, startling Bobo, and when he turns with the gun in his hand, it accidentally goes off. Wingo clutches his arm and yells as he falls down, crying and holding on to his wound. Even as a little kid, I remember thinking the acting was really good in this episode. When Wingo got shot, I remember thinking the blood looked pretty real for what amounted to a kid's TV show. I couldn't honestly believe it was real. It was something on TV, which I knew meant that it was probably fake. Wingo rolled around for a while as Bobo apologized, and as the others came in to see what all the noise was about, they found Bobo holding the gun and scolded him for being irresponsible. The whole time, Wingo is still acting like he's been shot, and I could see him begging the others to help him as he clutched his arm. It seemed very real, even now, and when it cut to a little bit later, as Wingo had his arm in a bandage and a sling, we got a finale where Bobo promises that he had learned his lesson and he would never play with guns ever again. Looking at it now, I could see the look on Wingo's face, and it looked like he was still in pain. Surely they hadn't really shot someone just for an episode of this show. That would have been insane. They all waved as the episode ended, and as the next one started, I thought I remembered how the show had ended. I remembered, and I really didn't want to see it. Sis, let's take a break. I don't think I want to watch the rest of this. If she heard me, she gave no indication. She just kept watching as the last episode on the tape played out. I wanted to get up and leave, but I kept my seat. It was just a kid's show after all. It was possible that I had remembered it wrong after all these years. Bobo's Circus, Episode 5. Tragedy. The circus had another new act. This time it was a group of acrobats who walked on a trapeze. There were 5 of them, and they all smiled and waved and introduced themselves as the Flying Benzinis. There was a mother, a father, 2 brothers, and a daughter, and they were all in colorful costumes. Bobo wasn't going to perform that night because the acrobats were going to be the main event. He was upset about that, but the ringmaster assured him that he would have his time next time. He told him to go check the trapeze and make sure that everything was in order. Bobo complained as he went to go do this, saying that it wasn't fair that they got to be the main event tonight. He didn't do a very good job of checking the stage or the trapeze, and as the family was introduced, they got up to prepare to go on and begin their routine. As Bobo watched, the trapeze began to become undone, and they all fell off screen. The fall didn't look so bad, but it was the screams that the audience gave out that were the worst. They were shrieking like someone had died. And when everyone came back on stage, it was once again to tell Bobo how he had been wrong. They told him that the performers had died because he hadn't done his job. Bobo said he was sorry, but they said that wasn't good enough. They said that he'd have to be punished, and then several of them came up to hit the poor clown with belts. The noise he made while they were hitting him was worse than the noise the audience had made. He screamed as they beat him, their belts lashing him as he curled up and took it. The strong man, the ringmaster, even some of the clowns rained down blows on Bobo, and when they were done, he just lay there for a minute as they told the audience how it was always important to do your job and do it right. People could get hurt if you didn't, and then there would need to be a punishment if they got hurt because of your negligence. The episode ended with everyone smiling and waving, except for Bobo. He just lay there and twitched as the credits rolled, and I was shaking as the episode ended. Why the hell did Mom let us watch this? My sister shrugged. Who knows? It only lasted until she caught us watching Laughing Plays. Remember? That's when she told us that we couldn't watch these anymore. I shuddered. I think she would have told us to stop watching them before that, if she had seen that last episode of Bobo's Circus. I wonder if there's any more of them. I don't know if I want to see any more of them, I told her flatly. Why do you want to see them so badly? I can remember a time when you had nightmares about these things constantly. Why do you want these VHS tapes? My sister sighed, staring into the static on the TV screen, and she seemed to contemplate how to answer me. Because I'm in trouble, big brother, and I'm hoping these tapes can help get me out. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.